Star Wars Young Jedi Knights Jedi Bounty Chapter 1. Jason Solo added another branch to the small campfire. He inhaled the jungle scents that mingled with the spicy smell of burning wood. Yavin 4 was alive and wild and mysterious around them. His twin sister, Jaina, stared pensively into the flames, while Tenel Ka, dressed in her usual lizard hide armor and boots, paced in restless circles around the small clearing. Raynar fidgeted beside Jason, picking up twigs and tossing them into the embers. His moon-round face had a fretful, haunted look, as if he wasn't at all enjoying their night out camping in the jungle. Jason leaned back and lay down with his hands behind his head. Oblivious to the bits of forest debris that disturbed themselves through his curly brown hair, he looked up into the star-filled sky and reached out with the force. He tried to sense small creatures hiding in the jungle around them, but tonight his usual ability eluded him. He sighed. Unfortunately, his Jedi senses picked up mostly his sister's worry, Raynar's anxiety, and Tenel Ka's frustration. "It's just not the same without Loie here," Jaina said. "I should certainly say not," said EMTD, the miniaturized translating droid. The little droid hovered with his newfound freedom of the micro-repulsor jets he had installed on Mechas 3. He followed just behind Tenel Ka as she made each relentless circuit of the clearing. Jason gave up trying to sense small animals. "It's been weeks since Loie left. He hasn't even tried to contact us." He sat up and looked at his sister. "Hey, you don't suppose Loie decided to join the Diversity Alliance, do you?" "I hope not. They're the ones who put a bounty on my father, after all," Raynar answered before Jaina could speak. He clenched one hand around a fistful of twigs until they snapped. "I'll bet there isn't a bounty hunter in the whole sector not trying to track down the infamous Born in Thol and collect the reward Nona Tarkona offered." A bit of bitterness infused his words. Jaina bit her lower lip. Reflections of the flames danced in her brandy brown eyes. "Zeke's out there with all those other bounty hunters, but at least he's on our side. He's taking a pretty big risk, too. If the Diversity Alliance finds out he worked for your father and helped your uncle Tycho, Zeke could be in trouble." Jason thought about the dark-haired friend. Zeke had been trained by the Shadow Academy to use the dark side of the Force, but had turned away from it. Deciding to start a new life, he'd chosen to be a bounty hunter. With his piercing emerald eyes, excellent fighting skills, and knowledge of the Force, Zeke would be a formidable opponent to anyone who crossed him. "Don't worry about Zeke, Jaina. I have a feeling he can take care of himself. I'm more worried that Loie might be pressured to stay on Ryloth and work for the Diversity Alliance. You heard what they did to Lusa." Jaina scowled. "Loie'd never join a political group that despises humans. He's our friend." Jason tried to imagine the lanky Wookiee hating anyone simply because he'd been ordered to. The idea seemed ridiculous. "No, I can't believe he'd go along with that, but why hasn't he at least tried to send us a message?" "Perhaps he has," Tenel Ka said from the opposite side of the clearing. "He may have been unsuccessful." Jason glanced up at the statuesque warrior girl as she broke into a trot. Her red gold hair, half of which flowed up in Deatheronian warrior braids, flowed up behind her like the tail of a comet. EMTD kept pace with her. "Surely you're not suggesting that poor Master Labaka might have been prevented from making contact with us?" the translating droid wailed. "It is possible. If so, he could have been prevented from returning here," Tenel Ka said. Jaina groaned. "Oh, that would explain a lot, like why Communication Center in Ryloth never let us speak to Loie when we get a connection to them." "Hey, if Loie's in trouble, then I think we ought to do something about it," Jason said. "Agreed," Tenel Ka said, still jogging along the perimeter of the clearing. Jaina shrugged. "No argument here. If we can't talk to Loie any other way, we'll go to Ryloth in person." "Oh my, we could be doomed," EMT said, "but I would gladly sacrifice my last circuits if it would be any help to Master Labaka." "Indeed," the little droid continued bravely. "Going to Ryloth may be an excellent opportunity for me to use my translating skills. I am fluent in over 16 forms of communication, you know. Well, I suppose it's all settled then." "I guess you should count me in too," Raynar said. Jason looked at Raynar. The slightly freckled youth with the spiky blonde hair seemed tense and edgy. Raynor's blue eyes followed Tenelka and EMTD around the circle, round and round. Do you really have to do that, Tenelka? Raynor blurted out at last. The jungles are dangerous at night, Tenelka replied without slowing. Her voice was steady, and she didn't grasp her pen as she spoke. Tion advised us to post a watch. Therefore, I am ensuring the safety of our campsite by patrolling the perimeter. I knew that, Raynor said in expression. Jason gave a lopsided grin. We know you offered to take the first watch, Tenelka. I think Raynor is just wondering why you're practically running. If you wore yourself out, you'll be too tired to fight against any real threat. Tenelka raised an eyebrow skeptically. I found that when I combine physical exercise with my other duties, I am able to think more clearly. It's an excellent way to release tension. Jaina chuckled. In that case, we could all use a good run. Just as his sister spoke, Jason sensed it. Something out in the jungle watching them. Tenelka noticed it too, for she stopped dead in her tracks. EMTD narrowly avoided colliding with her shoulder. A split second later, the warrior girl drove to the ground and rolled as a snarling, fang-filled ball of fur sprang through the air where she had been standing. Jason and Jaina, both their feet, touched lightsabers in hand before the furry creature touched the ground. It's a Rockmar, Jason yelled, probably looking for a quick meal. The meter-long beast sprang into the air again, a dynamo of black swirled fur and snapping teeth. This time it struck at the only person who had no weapon. Raynor, look out! Jaina cried, leaping after the vicious creature, but Raynor was already moving to dodge the sweeping claws. He launched himself forward, narrowly missing the campfire. Menacing yellow eyes glinted in the firelight. The Rockmar overshot its target and grazed Raynor's leg with its razor-sharp rear claws. The jungle predator spun around as Raynor snatched a burning branch from the fire, ready to defend himself. The Rockmar crouched on its back legs, muscles coiled, ready to lunge again. Raynor held his torch high. A strong arm yanked him backward just as the predator sprang, and a pair of lightsabers slashed past in a parallel glare of emerald green and electric violet. The energy blades sliced the vicious Rockmar into 3 even pieces that fell to the ground with wet thumps. With their lightsabers still blazing, Jason and Jaina inspected the clearing for any other would-be predators. I do not believe you will need this, Tenelka said, taking the firebrand from Radar and tossing it back in the campfire. Your instincts and reactions were commendable. Oh yes, very well done, everyone. EMTD's silver oval floated over Raynor. I scarcely had time to be frightened, though I do believe Master Raynor sustained some injury. Oh, it's not too bad. Raynor pulled aside his brown Jedi robe to examine the thigh where the Rockmar had clawed it. Dark blood ran from a pair of gashes just below his right hip. Jaina knelt beside Raynor, examined the leg. What do you think? She asked her brother. Jason winced. Looks worse than he had expected. I think we should have walked the way. I think we shouldn't have walked all the way here. Maybe we should have borrowed Loe's T-23 instead. It's a long hike back to the Great Temple. Tenelka pressed her hand against the wounds to slow the bleeding. Raynor should not walk with this injury, she agreed. We must bind the leg. By the light of the campfire, Jaina tore strips of cloth from the bottom of Raynor's Jedi robe. The EMTD brightened his optical sensors to provide lightning from above, while Jaina and Tenelka bandaged Raynor's thigh. Unperturbed by the blood, Tenelka wiped her hand on the ground. I think I'll be able to walk now, Raynor said bravely, though his voice wavered. While Jason and Jaina helped him stand, however, all the color drained from his face and his knees buckled. Jason caught him before he fell. Dear me! Perhaps Master Raynor would be better advised to rest while one of us returns to the Jedi Academy to summon assistance, EMTD said. I believe I would make an appropriate messenger, therefore I volunteer to serve in that capacity. But before the little droid had even finished speaking, Jason heard something approaching through the jungle. We've got company, he said. Tenelka had already assumed a fighting stance, lightsabers drawn before they identified the sound as hoofbeats. Lusa? Raynor murmured. Is it Lusa? At first, Jason thought his friend must be delirious, but he quickly discovered that Raynor was right. Her rich cinnamon hair and mane flying, Lusa galloped out of the trees. Only when she reached the center of the clearing did she come to an abrupt stop. In the firelight, sweat glistened on the center's bare torso and flanks. Her face seemed to go almost pale as Raynor when she looked at him. You're hurt, she gasped. Color not flooded into Raynor's face. Yeah, I noticed. Hey, how'd you find us? Jason asked. Still looking at Raynar with concern, Lusa answers distractedly. Before you left, Raynar gave me a general idea where you'd be camping. When I got the message, I just headed this direction and hoped to find you. Message? What message? Jane asked. Oh, Lusa snapped a hoof. Her eyes sought Tenelka. I believe you have a grandmother who used to be queen of Hapi's cluster? This is a fact, Tenelka said. Well, she's wreaking havoc with the protective forces stationed in Order. She asked for Master Skywalker, and when she found he wasn't here, she demanded to see you immediately. Tiana told you they were out, and the New Republic forces wanted to detain her ship while they ran a background check, but your grandmother wouldn't listen. She must have intimidated the guards somehow, because she'll be a landing field in half an hour. Jason chuckled. That sounds like Tatum, all right. Tenelka quirked an eyebrow at him. It would have seemed like we all have business back at the Jedi Academy. She turned her cool gray eyes towards Lusa. Raynar requires immediate attention. He cannot walk. I could carry him, Lusa said. She sounded rather uncertain. Jason knew that the idea must have been difficult for the Centaur girl. For years, the Diversity Alliance had taught her to loathe humans. She was just beginning to unlearn her distaste for physical contact with them. I couldn't ask you to, Raynar began. You do not need to ask, Lusa interrupted. She folded her legs to kneel beside him. Then she spoke gently. I am offering. Jason breathed a sigh of relief. Well then, Jaina said, what are we waiting for? It took the companions nearly 2 hours to get back the jungles to the Jedi Academy. Jaina and Lusa took Raynar into the great temple so that the medical droids could examine him, while Tenelka and Jason headed directly towards the landing field. An armored Hapan vessel hovered overhead. A couple of New Republic Guardian ships had apparently accompanied it down from orbit. The guards stood awkwardly in the stubbly grass, gazing up at the cruiser. At Tenelka and Jason's approach, the ship finally descended into the field. When the exit hatch opened, 24 armored Hapan soldiers scrambled down the ramp and arrayed themselves around the vessel to form a barrier against anyone who might try to come close to the former Queen of Hapes. Only then did Tatum herself appear. The aristocratic old woman glided down the ramp, waved an imperious hand to summon her granddaughter and Jason, and disappeared again into the ship. Jason felt nervous as he and Tenelka walked toward the ring of guards, who parted to let them pass. The warrior girl led the way into the ship without hesitation. In her centermost chamber, Tatum waited for them. She perched regally on a repulsor bench, looking every centimeter the queen that she had once been. Tenelka stopped directly in front of her grandmother. I assume you have brought information about the Diversity Alliance, she said without preamble. Tatum sighed. Such a beautiful child, and such a shame the loss of your arm in that lightsaber accident. If you'd only reconsider that prosthetic limb. Jason saw Tenelka stiffen. Grandmother, you did not come to Yavin 4 to discuss my arm. Jason was surprised that the former queen did not seem offended by her grandmother's abrupt answer, but merely shrugged and smiled faintly. No, but you can't blame a grandmother for trying. I did some research for you. Tenelka nodded. What have you learned about Nona Tarkona? Her grandmother's smile grew warmer. Your instincts about the Diversity Alliance are quite correct. It's more than a simple political movement. Their conspiracies and intrigues are almost worthy of the Hapan government. Tenelka scowled. That was not good news. Jason leaned forward to hear what Tatum would say next. My spies have only begun to discover a particular truth that the Diversity Alliance hides, even from some of its most dedicated followers. But first, let me warn you. Although they preach unity and equality for all alien species, the Alliance itself is intolerant in its way, as the Empire ever was. I'd even venture to say that the Diversity Alliance is founded more on hatred of humans than on the idea of unity. Yeah, we kind of got that impression too, Jason said. Tenelka's grandmother glanced at him and continued. You probably know the Diversity Alliance headquarters are in Ryloth, homeworld of the Twi'lek race. Tenelka nodded impatiently. Yes, their leader is a Twi'lek. It's only logical that she would base their headquarters. But what you don't know, Tatum interrupted, is that all the profits from real spice, the most lucrative of Ryloth exports, have for the past 2 years been siphoned off to fund the Diversity Alliance. Jason listened with interest. His father, Han Solo, had told him about his adventures with the Glitterstim spice from the planet Kessel, but Jason knew relatively little about Rill. And, Tenelka went on, those profits have built the Diversity Alliance into a formidable power indeed. Their funds have been used to purchase weapons, both legal and illegal, to hire bounty hunters to track down enemies, and hire assassins to ensure silence of former friends. Jason gave a low whistle. The erstwhile queen's expression turned frosty. Apparently, this Nola Tarcona is rather more tolerant of her enemies than she is of friends who decide to go their own way. Leaving the Diversity Alliance is a dangerous proposition. That is what we have learned so far. But I think we'll find there's much, much more. Jason and Tunnelcaw exchanged worried glances. Your information is most useful, Tunnelcaw said. We may need to do further research. Thank you, grandmother. We better have a talk with Lusa, Jason said.